So for the second video, 9.1, I just wanted to recap our first video. Let's just highlight those characteristics one more time of parabolas. So we have a vertex, so a max or a min. We have that line of symmetry cutting the parabola in half. We have our y-intercept, and we'll have our zeros. So in this video, I just want to focus on how do it was really easy to identify these characteristics when we're actually given the graph, right? You look at the graph, it's easy to identify. But what if I give you an equation? Could you identify those same characteristics? And you can't. So I'm going to be jumping back and forth between our previous notes and then these notes. So there's actually an equation for the line of symmetry. Okay, that line of symmetry that, again, it cuts our parabola in half. We're going to calculate that. And so that calculation comes from this opposite of b all over 2a. So again, here's my equation at the top. The 2x squared, the 2 itself is my a value, the 4 is the b, and the negative 3 is my c. So I would take the opposite of my b value all over 2 times my a value. And I would simplify that to negative 4 over 4, or that's just negative 1. Now remember, this is a vertical line. Okay, my vertical lines are always written, if you remember, as x equals. It's a vertical line, so it's x equals negative 1. So there's my line of symmetry. So now, how do I find my vertex? Well, my vertex always, notice how my vertex is always on my line of symmetry, every time. So I'm going to use that information to my advantage. If I know my vertex is going to be on my line of symmetry, then my x value of my vertex will be negative 1. So let me just kind of make that connection for you guys just really quick. So let me just find a different color. Let's do something obnoxious. Let's do like a yellowy. So if you notice here, okay, here's my vertex. We said our vertex was, I kind of crossed it out, but 1, 3. Notice how my line of symmetry is 1. The x was 1. Then here's my vertex here, and we said our vertex was 0, 4. Notice how my line of symmetry was 0. And then just one more, here's my vertex again, and we said our vertex point was at negative 1, 0. Notice how the x is negative 1. Okay, so if I know x is going to be the line of symmetry value, then what I'll do is I can plug this into the equation. So I'll do 2 times negative 1 squared plus 4 times negative 1. Notice how, again, I'm using parentheses, and we'll simplify. So this is just 2 times 1. And a lot of times I'm going to make baby steps. You can take bigger steps. That's fine, but you're more likely to make a mistake. 4 times negative 1, negative 4, minus 3. So that's just 2 minus 4 minus 3, or negative 2 minus 3. Okay, so I get out negative 5. That's my y value. That's what I got out. So my vertex is at negative 1, negative 5. Excuse me. And then my y-intercept, you guys are going to like this. So let's see if you guys can notice a pattern. So let's see, my y-intercept, oh, you guys didn't have your equations here. Never mind. Your y-intercept is always your c value. So maybe make that really big. Always your c value. And so we've got this labeled already. Okay, so my y-intercept, negative 3. Woohoo, that was pretty easy. Just make sure you put it as a coordinate 0, negative 3. So let's look at the second example. Same idea. You may want to just go ahead and label everything as A, B, and C. So I'm going to take the opposite of my b value, which is 4. So it's going to make it negative 4 all over 2 times my a value, which is negative 3. And so it's not always going to work out really nicely. Oh. So in this one, this is going to reduce to negative 4 over negative 6. So it will be positive because the negative divided by a negative is a positive, and I'll reduce that to 2/3. So in this case, my line of symmetry is a fraction. That's okay. So now I need to take that information and I'm going to plug it in to find my vertex. So be very careful. Take your time. So I'm going to plug in my 2/3, square that, plus 4 times 2/3 minus 5. Okay, so I know that 2/3 squared, okay, that's going to be 4/9. So maybe that's all I do in that one. And then 4 times 2/3 is going to give me 8/3 minus 5. And again, you guys can plug this into your calculator if you'd like. But the more mental math you do, the better. So then I can do 3 times 4/9, which is negative 12 over 9. And then I'll do plus 8/3 minus 5. I'm just going to reduce this, okay? That gives me negative 4/3. It's the same thing, which is convenient because then I've got common denominators, if you remember your fraction rules. So negative 4/3 plus 8/3 is going to give me 4/3 minus 5, and that's going to shoot out negative 3 and 2/3. So that was a little tedious, but you find your vertex, okay, and your vertex is the point 2/3, comma, negative 3 and 2/3. Now you can do a decimal. You'll lose accuracy with decimals, so I prefer to do fractions. And then real easy, your y-intercept is your c value, so that's negative 5, or the point 0, negative 5. All right, so this last one, number 3, why don't you guys try doing this one solely on your own? So my b value, so let's label these a, b, and c. So I would do the opposite of b all over 2a. And so that's going to give me negative 2 over 4, or that's just negative 1/2. So my line of symmetry is x equals negative 1/2. So then from here, I could take this information and plug it in to find my vertex. So I'll do 2 times negative 1/2 x, or sorry, 1/2 squared, plus 2 times 1/2. Excuse me. And then plus 2. And then let's see, I know that negative 1/2 squared is going to give me positive 1/4. Now 2 times negative 1/2 is negative 1, and then plus the 2. Now 2 times 1/4 is 2/4. So that's 2/4, or I just know that's going to be 1/2 minus 1 plus 2. And then when I just go ahead and I do all of that together, so 1/2 minus 1 is negative 1/2, plus 2 is 1/2. But I feel like, let me just make sure I didn't do anything wrong. Yep. Okay, so this is going to give me negative 1/2 plus 2, so out would shoot 1.5, or 1.5. And so your vertex is going to be negative 1/2 and 1 and 1/2. And then finally, your y-intercept is your c value, which is 2, or the point 0, 2. And that's how we identify the same characteristics that we did in our first video. Vertex, axis of symmetry, and y-intercepts. We will look at zeros later on. There's certain ways we do that, but I just wanted your focus to be on those 3.